places that have open submissions and have maybe not astronomical submissions fees, and people are just looking for places to submit their work, and I think that some people just kind of like make a list, and they just, I know I've done that before. I sent manuscript out to several presses that I hadn't read before. Some of them I was familiar with their work, but it's just, it's one of, I'm sure, if you start getting listed in Duotrope and that sort of thing, which we did, and we honestly haven't even put calls out there other than initially when we first started. We did a couple of Facebook posts and that sort of thing, and then stopped because we ended up getting inundated with things, and we even put a submissions fee on there. It's like $10 to submit, and it was just people. I just need a place to send their work, I guess.
Yeah, I think we're still trying to decide how much we want to be a part of that particular hustle.
Yeah,
which I don't think. I think it's got its pros and cons, and it's a way for people to put to get work out there, and oftentimes the results are really cool and surprising. But I think we will probably continue to take some submissions from online, but we're trying to find precisely the right balance, because it is important for us that this be a product of a local sensibility and a local community as well.
Yeah. I want to talk about there's a difference between also what you do with a zine or a journal and what you do with full-length manuscripts and things too, because there's a difference in what, when I was working with Four Chambers as an editor, they had we had the journal, which was 50+% local, and then some submissions from across the country and so forth. And then when we were doing books, when we started doing that, there's a very, the only way to really enter that sphere and have any sort of support is to get distribution, and distributors don't want to take you on if you're too hyper local. And that becomes kind of the struggle to maintain the balance between being a service to the community and then also, being viable as a business. Which I'm curious about. The zine is called Oasis, but it's Holum Press. So at some point, and I won't have a separate question about the name, but is there the thought, or was there the sort of like forethought of doing other projects under the Holum Press name, or
Yeah, that was the intention with the creation of the press, and sort of speaks to the scope of what we'd like to do in the future too, is integrate more projects.
I think there were two, maybe three pieces that kind of led us to say that we're not just Oasis, we're Holum Press. One is we sort of just picked the name and liked it for our first issue, and two, around the time of our second issue, we ended up getting our hands on a perfect binder. And so we're like, well, gosh, we now own some piece of the means of production here. Yeah. And that aligns very nicely with our sensibilities and our intent. And so we should take seriously this notion that that Holum Press can be bigger than Oasis. And we've done a handful of other projects and are kind of constantly looking for others to do. It's always a matter of kind of getting the people power together and doing the work. But Josh, what were the other things we printed that's not Oasis?
Yeah, we bound Prickly Pear Press's We Grow Anyway poetry anthology.
Cool.
The first one. They're looking for submissions for the second one, if you are listening to this. And we also bound a photo sort of like collection of photography called Hello Sunshine.
Okay.
And more recently, we've taken on typesetting and binding and designing sort of like some artwork for this to be released set of lecture notes from Herbert Marcuse, from the International Marcuse Society, which is pretty exciting.
Nice.
Yeah. And we've had some other notions of just getting the materials together and publishing some copies of out of press but public domain works that we think
I've done that too as well.
Yeah.
More recently, just found interesting zines online and reprinted and bound them and distributed them freely.
Yeah,
Nice.
and even older stuff by like old Marxist writers or something that maybe are harder to come by, or that we just want to sort of have within our aesthetic canon of things we've done. But yeah, so we're now starting to think of this as kind of a couple different streams of projects. One is continuing to do Oasis a couple times a year, and the other is looking for and being receptive to projects that we can put our expertise into. Because now we know how to typeset things. We've got the software, and we have a few people now who are pretty good at that. And we've sort of figured out good ways to source paper and printing and so on. And we've got like art and design talent that we're happy to share. And we have a perfect binder that is like a beautiful clunky thing that is like really viscerally gives you a sense of like you pull the lever and you produce a thing, right? This is a means of production.
Nice. To like hold it down with both hands.
Yeah.
But not too hard.
Well, there's something about that too that goes hand in hand with a Marxist sort of thing going on.
Yeah.
Now, that was something I was going to ask as well. Is that anti-capitalist doesn't necessarily mean Marxist? It would sort of include Marxist, but would you say that the spirit and philosophy is Marxist leaning?
I would say so. Yeah. I think we're not generally like too specific.
Yeah, I think a lot of the pieces end up being, critical thought and theory that is not, like this is
explicitly espousing some philosophy
Marxist.
Or
but I'm a Marxist,
philosophy.
and I think most of us are Marxists, in one flavor or another. But there's a lot of, I think, other sort of philosophical roots. We have a couple of our group are Marcuse scholars, and so that's been a big piece. And I think we've got Adorno in there,
new school hits.
Yeah, all old school hits, and also sort of the sensibilities of Ursula Le Guin, from whom we stole the Holum name.
Right. Okay. Which is, so who are you all fans of Le Guin, or was there a particular one of the group who really wanted to put that forward? Or
well, I think Andrew especially is probably the mainstay fan, but I think we're all generally inspired by her.
Yeah. It seemed very appropriate for our first issue because we were imagining a better skyline, and that's been, I think, a sort of a, Le Guin has this classic line about, like, it seems impossible to imagine the end of capitalism, but the same thing was true for the divine right of kings. And so we sort of see ourselves as trying to do some of that imaginative work in some of these, and also sort of, if we're not directly imagining the end of capitalism, then we should be asking the question of why that's hard, and looking into those types of social dynamics that make it hard to imagine the end of capitalism. So the Holum tree is a tree on Anaris, I think, in Le Guin's novel The Dispossessed, which is the moon that this sort of anarchist socialist group is exiled to, and it's a very harsh place, but they build a really sort of beautiful society amidst this harsh landscape and a world of relative scarcity, but they
quite desert-like.
Yeah, very desert-like. And the Holum tree is one of the few plants there that really they can do a lot with. And so we thought that was appropriate. And then, I think the other piece is between our first and second issue, she died.
I was going to say, it's kind of, it's almost eerily, like, I don't know, kismet or something that you were starting this project just as Le Guin died.
Yeah. So we ended up sort of talking about that a little bit in issue 2, and I don't think
it's dedicated to
it's dedicated to her, and it hasn't been, I think, an obvious part of any of our issues since, but I think it's been kind of an underlying
sort of the spirit that goes in there.
Yeah. I'm personally a science fiction writer. That's what I'm trying to do professionally in a lot of ways. And Ursula Le Guin's the greatest science fiction writer of all time. It's like not particularly even close. And I've taken a lot of inspiration from her, and I think as a writer and also politically, and I think everyone else in the group also has a sense of her like gentleness of spirit in approaching these really hard problems.
Creative and critical at the same time.
Exactly.
So are you guys all philosophy majors, or like can you talk a little bit about the group and who is involved and how many of you there are, and kind of, how did you all meet? Did you all go to school together? Or, it's kind of, it's not, I was, when I was like in high school, it was not easy to find, other people who had read the Communist Manifesto and were into Billy Bragg. So, it's not, certainly it seems in Phoenix, and granted, I don't know, I think I'm probably a little older than you guys, but, it's, for a long time, it was very hard to find anybody who was interested in talking about any left-leaning politics and that sort of thing. So,
yeah, well, that kind of feeling is sort of what we were speaking to, and like what drew us together, I think, was that we had found that in all of each other, and we sort of saw that as like a space that could be spoken into, you know what I mean? Which is, I think, what Andrew was talking about with like why we wanted to
it sort of speaks to the Oasis aspect of people who want to find that sort
like
of
congregating. Yeah, exactly. A sort of respite. Yeah, go ahead.
The Oasis thing, it definitely speaks to, I think, our experience and what we're trying to build.
That desire to,
I think there's about maybe a dozen people who have been involved directly in the editorial process.
Is it consistent, or have people kind of floated in and out? And
people float in and out a little bit, but for the most part, it's
pretty solid.
We've been pretty solid. People end up needing
the last year and a half,
or leaving for a while, but. And no, we're not all philosophy majors. I'm not a philosophy major. I think we have. Do we have one philosophy PhD?
You got to have at least one.
Maybe
we got to have one.
We're spinning our
street
wheels.
Cred,
Otherwise,
and we've got some mathematics background. We've got
who I think that's how I heard about you guys. When I don't remember his name, unfortunately, but he I think he's the mathematician. He was at the
maybe Taylor.
Yeah, he was at the Piper Center for this publishing thing that I was there.
The Sonoran Small Press.
Yeah.
Taylor and a few others really took the lead on putting that together, and
and Carissa especially,
and Carissa as well. So Taylor comes from a math background, but he's very philosophically minded.